Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here. So of course today I have a Is It Platinum Worthy review of Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. Now I have finished the story and I've done some few achievements here and there. First and foremost, first off, I'm going to address the background footage here. You're going to be seeing something that is in chapter 2. The game is split into 5 chapters. Again, this is non-spoiler. Non-spoilers right now. This first chunk is going to have no spoilers in it, at least no major spoilers or anything like that. There is going to be a spoiler section towards the end of the review that will have its own little thing going on. Now, in the background, you're going to be seeing a mission in Chapter 2. The main reason why I am doing this is because I want to display a general mission structure that's not just at the early game or whatever, but I also did want to show a boss. The boss being the Penguin, extremely early, not really spoilery. You see him very early on. You know he's going to be a boss, so you're going to be seeing that. Generally speaking, how the interaction, you're going to see how a light mission structure works when ending with a boss. So, and it's really early, so that's something to keep in mind here. I do want to address here that the chapters are not the same length as each other. The chapters are not the same length, as I will get into a little bit later. Now, first off, to answer the question, is Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, is it platinum worthy? And I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. The achievements are relatively easy to do. There is one aspect of it that's a little bit of a pain, but that is going to be saved for when I start talking about exploration and whatnot. Now, my top 3 LEGO games of all time are LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. That's number 1, my favorite LEGO game of all time. Then, Lego Lord of the Rings. I just have a personal soft spot for it, playing it on the GameCube. I just have there's a special spot for me personally. And then Lego Batman 3. So those are my top 3. Now, does Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight dethrone any of those 3 for me personally? No, absolutely not. But is it still a pretty solid game? Yes. I'm gonna try my best to keep this review positive. Keep in mind there is a particular section that's going to be negative as a whole because you'll understand. But let's talk about music here. Music I thought was really solid. Also, I believe I still have streamer mode enabled. At least I hope I do, because otherwise I don't copyright strike me, please. But if they do, then I'm gonna have to try my best to mask the audio. But the music references and whatnot is really solid. Really solid. Music is the whole this game. I mean, come on, it's Batman. You at least you shouldn't f that up. There are really only 2 popular songs in this entire game. There's one during Michael Keaton's Batman section. By the way, I'm gonna identify the particular eras of Batman by the main actor, not the director or anything else. So I'm not going to be calling it Christopher Nolan. I will be calling the Dark Knight Trilogy Dark Knight Trilogy. That's going to be the exception. But those are things I'm going to get into a little bit later. But during Michael Keaton's section, there is a particular song. If you have seen the original Batman, like Michael Keaton's Batman, you know the song. It plays at the very beginning of the movie. After, of course, Batman's theme song plays. So do keep that in mind. That is mostly for if you plan on streaming or doing videos or anything like that. You need to be aware of that. The only other one, at least that I personally recognize, is at the credits. But music as a whole, pretty good. Now, visually, this is the best LEGO game. Visually. Looks phenomenal. It's just as good as the LEGO Skywalker Saga. I have issues with that game. But visually, it looks phenomenal. Looks really good. However, this is where I'm going to start to talk about performance. I did play this game on the PS5. Something to keep in mind here is you have to have this game on performance mode. You have to. Even when in performance mode, keep in mind, Torchic and I, we played the entire story together in split-screen co-op. We did have lag spikes at times. Also, a boss in the future has had a quite of a major bug where a particular Lego set piece that the boss spawns stayed in the arena, and pretty much it almost forced us to restart the entire fight because it was a pain. It was a pain situation. I would just recommend, if you get to that particular boss, when the boss has you outside of the arena, try to force yourself to stay in the center of the arena as much as possible. Otherwise, if you get that bug, it's going to be very, very painful to do because you have the perfect dodge roll basically in order to try to survive that. But again, I'm getting those are obscure. If you know, you know. We don't. That's okay. Those were the only bugs that we ran into. Grappling is a thing in this game. I have had the issue on a very consistent basis where, like, you actually do have to be facing the direction you're grappling. Otherwise, you can turn your camera and it'll tell you press left bumper or, well, I believe it's left bumper or right bumper to grapple. I bet it's left bumper to grapple, I'm pretty sure. You'll press that to grapple, but it will actually grapple in a completely different direction. I've had that happen quite a few times. But the stutters are light, not super duper intrusive. We've only ran into a few issues here and there. Outside of that, pretty solidly done. And of course, there's the occasional camera can't see anything. So, but those are quite minor issues. They didn't impact our experience of playing through the game very much. Now, I'm going to talk about how the story is structured. Again, I'm not going to be talking about spoilers or anything like that. I will not be talking about anything that occurs past Chapter 2. There are 5 chapters in this game. Of course, I'm not going to talk about anything that the achievements or / trophies do not show you already. For instance, your side characters being Jim Gordon, Catwoman, Batgirl, Robin, Nightwing, and Talia. Talia's right at the very beginning of the game. Now, so I'm going to be talking about things that are in the trophy section. By the way, if you have finished the game, there is a particular reason why I am wording things the way I am, because there's a certain thing that's not in the trophy list, so I'm wording it carefully, just so you know. Now, because I want it to remain as it was when you played through it. So, for those of you that are here for non-spoiler stuff, you might think that the chapters are about the same length. That is not the case. My first knock against this game is that the quality drops drastically after Chapter 2. At least from our experience, Chapters 3 and 4 were very short, and Chapter 4 specifically is probably the worst chapter in the entire game. And it doesn't, like, completely spike back up, but the Chapter 5 is a step up in quality. It is quite noticeable. Now, something that here is what I'm going to mention. Unfortunately, Arkham is not heavily referenced very much. Especially in a particular section where you think it would be mentioned. Arkham is not really referenced that much. However, they do reference some of the specific gadgets that were used in the Arkham series. By the way, I'm talking about things outside of just suits and vehicles. As I'll get into when we get to the exploration section. Now, the only movies that are referenced regularly throughout this game is Michael Keaton's Batman and the Dark Knight trilogy. Those two are the main ones. And then your middle section is going to reference mainly the George Clooney Batman. Keep in mind, which a lot of people have not seen. Something to keep in mind, though, most Batman villains have only ever made 2 movie appearances. Joker has only ever made 2 movie appearances. Poison Ivy only has 1. Mr. Freeze only has 1. Bane has 2. Scarecrow also only has 1. So though that's something to keep in mind. Also, I'm gonna set this expectation. Now, Harley Quinn is not in the game at all, so do not have the expectation of her being in the game at all. Something to keep in mind, though, she is one of the only villains, to my knowledge, that did not originate in the comics. She originates in the Batman animated series. So that is something to keep in mind. And then later got added to the comics, like a year later. Now, something else to keep in mind here. Villains do not swap what version they are. There is only one exception to this, and it is in Chapter 1 where no. I believe it's chapter 1, I believe, where at the end of chapter 1 is where you find out that that swap happens. That is the only villain to ever swap in the entire game. To me, that's a massive wasted opportunity. Also, I'm not a huge fan of Batman quipping that often. Something else here. Keep your expectations very low for references outside of that. For example, the animated series. No villains from the animated series will make an appearance. Animated series will get a nice little thing, and that's kind of it. Outside of cosmetics and whatnot. Adam West Batman, the OG, will also not be referenced outside of a which we've only gotten to happen twice. So that's probably my biggest criticism of Batman in terms of story and that sort of thing is the massive lack of representation from anything that's not George Clooney, Michael Keaton, and Dark Knight. There's very little references outside of that. But the references that, when they pop up, it is quite nice. But I think they could have done a lot more with the series. Oh, also, none of Arkham's, one of Arkham's villains does appear. But that's territory that I'm not going to be getting into here. Also, nothing that Mark Hamill voices for the Joker is not in this game. Massive wasted opportunity. Massive wasted opportunity not having Mark Hamill do anything in this game. So there's that. Now, in terms of suits, I am surprised that they reference some of the other stuff. Like, for example, Absolute Batman. That is a suit that you will see me using most of the time. Absolute Batman being referenced was quite an interesting surprise. So, there is that. So just to recap, structure of the story, more specifically, the lengths are varied. Like, Chapter 3 and 4 is basically Chapter 1. Like, you can combine both of those chapters. Like, I would say the end of Chapter 2 is probably the halfway point of the game. Again, I'm saying things like that for a specific reason. If you know, you know. But yeah, Chapter 2, the end of Chapter 2 is the halfway point. Like, Chapters 3, 4, and 5 are about the same length mission-wise. Like, in totality of the mission, they're the same length as Chapters 1 and 2. And it doesn't feel great. Pacing feels off. Now it's time to get to exploration. This is where my biggest criticisms from the game are going to come from. Because it is exactly like Spider-Man 2. And some elements of Spider-Man 1. It feels like it doesn't reference Arkham enough. What I'm going to say is when you're playing through missions specifically, and you're in very contained areas, it feels like Arkham. It feels a little bit like Arkham. The exploration, when you're moving around and stuff, that's when it completely ceases to feel like Arkham at all, and it feels like Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1. Now, you are going to see some comparisons in the background, some side-by-sides. For example, and keep in mind, I'm going to say these, they're not going to be in the order that I'm showing them in, but suits being in a grid pattern, which is a nitpick. Again, this is more of a things add up. There is a broadcast beacon. I do not have footage of Spider-Man 1's beacon, but you do a little puzzle with Batgirl to unlock the beacon, which unlocks all of the markers and whatnot in the areas. In my personal opinion, there is way too many fucking markers in that fucking thing. There's way too many markers. Like, holy shit. That is probably my biggest issue with trying to get this achievement done, is the amount of markers pocketed in one area. There was not that many per each area in Spider-Man 2. Also, how the map is split up feels a little unnecessary and is divided up very similarly to how Spider-Man 2 is. Also, wind tunnels are everything in Spider-Man 2. They're in Legacy of the Dark Knight now. It makes the vehicles feel completely fucking useless. Vehicles are kind of just a nice, they're there. Generally speaking, you don't actually move around with vehicles very much. Also, grappling across different places, it doesn't feel the same, it doesn't feel like Arkham necessarily, it feels like Spider-Man. Also, pressing X before the grapple finishes gives you a little bit of height. You can also use the focus bar to boost yourself up. Kind of like how Spider-Man, when you press buttons at the right time, you can do a special thing. Well, you can launch off certain objects before you start web swinging. So there is that. Compiling all of that with, Arkham's combat and whatnot, which Spider-Man definitely took some stuff from Arkham and whatnot. I will say the web, but the thing is, Arkham has a very specific feel. When I've played Arkham, it feels very, very different than when I'm playing like Spider-Man 1 or Spider-Man 2. They feel different. And for me, this game doesn't feel like I'm playing Arkham. It feels like, especially in open world sections, that I am playing Spider-Man 2. Also, the molecule puzzles. What the fuck? What the fuck? I know I'm showing Spider-Man 2's variation specifically, but holy, is it almost exactly like Spider-Man 1's. And of course, the Spider-Man franchise is more recent. And I don't recall if Arkham really had that occur. So, again, Spider-Man 2 is more recent. It feels like they're taking a lot of stuff from Spider-Man 2 and not quite understanding why it works in terms of clutter. Also, the crime symbol, exactly the same. In my personal opinion, they really should have stuck to this being more of a closed campaign type of deal over and maybe just having a little bit of an open world, but instead just pivoting towards a hard, seemingly Spider-Man 2 route. And to me, that doesn't make it feel that great. Now, I'm going to give my general score before I start getting into the story. Now, again, it is not top 3 LEGO games of all time for me personally. This is also not going to be my game of the year, most likely. Even like probably not even game of the month, because I have some high hopes for 007. For now, I think I would give this a 6 out of 10 in terms of couch co-op. However, if you're playing this by yourself, you might honestly have a little bit of a better time until you get to the exploration stuff. So I would say that for those, you'll probably be bumped up to a 7 if you're playing by yourself. But in terms of couch co-op, it's not particularly great. I'm just gonna say 6. Of course, 5 being average. But yeah, it's losing points mainly for the exploration, lack of representation from anything that's not Michael Keaton, George Clooney, or the Dark Knight trilogy. So for those reasons, that's why I'm just gonna have it, about a 6 out of 10, and also story. Now, if you don't want to hear spoilers, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. But we are going to start talking about spoilers. Now, spoiler territory here. Spoiler territory here. How did I personally feel about Talia being the final villain? There being a secret chapter 6, swapping, Batman between, that or whatever. Now, something that I didn't mention in my spoiler-free section was the fact that Batman is completely useless after Chapter 2. Batman is completely useless after Chapter 2 for the most part. The reason I can't mention that because I did not want to go too into depth on Robin, Batgirl, or Nightwing's abilities or anything like that. But yeah, Batman feels completely useless, at least when playing with 2 players. And again, that is a situation that you're probably not going to run into when you're playing solo. You're just going to be playing a lot of Batgirl and Robin during those sections. Now, the worst boss fight in the entire game is Mr. Freeze, in my opinion. Mr. Freeze was the one that we ran into a glitch with. Also, it happens very suddenly, and there's not as much build-up to Mr. Freeze's fight as there was with Poison Ivy's and, of course, Bane's later on. Now, getting into the specific versions of the villain, it is, in my personal opinion, Joker should have been the main villain, not Bane. Also, Joker should have swapped to animated series Joker when there was that time. Maybe swap to Arkham Asylum's Joker when, Arkham happened. But I kind of understand why they went with Heath Ledger Joker. But how is animated Joker just not there? Also, the animated series, like the most 2 iconic things to come from any sort of Batman animated stuff were not referenced. One being the Killing Joke is not referenced. I can understand why, because that is a very, very dark thing. So, and also Harley Quinn not being in the game, so the whole meme of Harley Quinn with Nightwing also was not referenced at all there either. That is kind of understandable. Now, this is where I start to get into some hot takes here. Catwoman, my personal favorite, is Eartha Kitt's Catwoman. I was kind of disappointed that her Catwoman wasn't used, uh, but whatever. Penguin, you have to use Danny DeVito's version. You just have to. Two Face, they actually used Tommy Lee Jones's Two Face, not the Dark Knight trilogy's Two Face. So I thought that was kind of an interesting choice. The Riddler is in the game, however, he's not a main part in it at all. Based on the fit, I'm going to guess that they're using the OG Adam West Batman's Riddler, because the only other Riddler that's occurred outside of the Batman was Jim Carrey played the Riddler in Batman Forever, Val Kilmer's Batman. So that's something to keep in mind there. But again, I'm a villain. Poison Ivy, of course, I thought they did a Poison Ivy, of course, only has one appearance, being George Clooney's Batman. Same with the Mr. Freeze. Now, getting into Bane here. Bane, I actually do not care for Dark Knight Trilogy's Bane. If I'm being perfectly honest, my favorite design is the animated series, and I do think George Clooney's Batman is second. And well, is number one in terms of live action. Keep in mind, the Dark Knight Trilogy as a whole, I do not like most of the villains from that series. Because my favorite variations are either not in live action, or like Jack Nicholson is my favorite live action Joker, and I just don't. They're missing Bane's mask. Like, how are you just gonna be missing Bane's actual Bane's mask? Bane is just a guy with some tubes on his face in the Dark Knight Trilogy. Like come on. But I thought as a villain he works out pretty well. Talia it feels like it comes out of nowhere, but honestly, I called it when Torchic and we were playing together towards the end of chapter 5. I did call it. I did call that. Yeah, she's gonna become the final villain just because, and that's how it kind of felt. The main villain should have been Bane. If, of course, not Joker. Also, Heath Ledger's Joker doesn't last as long as both of us would have liked. Our favorite sections were when Joker and Batman were part of the same plot line. But they split off after Chapter 1. Chapter 2 still holds up quite well. And then, the rest goes to shit for a little bit. And then, Heath Ledger's Joker comes back. Great time. And then, whatnot. Now, the villain I didn't mention in my spoiler-free section was Scarecrow. Scarecrow actually does make an appearance. It is not the movie version, though. It is actually the Arkham games version. And Arkham does get a little bit of a reference in Arkham Asylum with that. Also, Deadshot and Deathstroke are in there for some reason. Deathstroke actually has voice lines. However, Deadshot does not. Barely mentioned. Also, Killer Croc is also missing from the game as well, which is fine, I guess. Also, there's some random ass. There's a Condiment Man, a Kite Man, Firefly. I actually did recognize, but mainly from the animated series, not from anything else per se. I wish Scarecrow would have gotten a little bit more shine. Oh, also Solomon Grundy does make a brief appearance, but doesn't play any major role. I'm going to say the same thing for Scarecrow. Scarecrow is used as a reference, not as a major thing necessarily. So, there is all of that. Whew. But yeah, keeping all of that in mind, I don't think this is nowhere close to being as bad as the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga. They completely cut out quite a bit of my favorite missions from the complete saga, so that kind of burned me quite a bit. Also, how the game is split up. The game's too open, in my opinion. I would have liked the Lego Star Wars to have been a little bit more closed. That's something that I would want from a more of a realistic-looking thing. I think Lego should I think they should kind of stop just being super-duper open world and focus more on the quality of the campaign missions. because I think they're kind of going in the wrong direction here. But I would not be surprised if like their next game is a Marvel, like a Marvel game or something like that. If that's the case, I actually do not plan on playing those, because again, Lego Batman I had nostalgia for. Same with Lego Star Wars, so I was excited for those too. But outside of that, the only things I feel anything for would be like Lego Harry Potter. If they did a great job, they would have to do a pretty good job with it. They did a good job with Lego Harry Potter. I would definitely play the shit out of those with Torchic, because I know Torchic would absolutely love that. But outside of that, that's where things are going to lie. And so, on that note, though, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I will say it did do some good customization stuff as well. I really do actually quite enjoy the customization and whatnot in Lego Batman as well. And they kept finding some stuff specific to the campaign itself. Okay, so yeah, those are reasons why it gets a 6 out of 10 from me personally. If you enjoyed, let me know in the comments below. Let me know in the comments below what y'all thought of the game, especially if you've beaten it. And let me just give me like it was a 10 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10. I think both of those are. Again, it depends on if you're couch co-op or solo. Like I said, if you're solo, it's gonna be a 7 out of 10 for you. If you're doing a couch co-op, it's a 6 out of 10. And let's compare it to other couch co-op games like Split Fiction, for instance, or even Lego Star Wars. Torchic and I did have a slightly better time with it. It was just when we reached those last few movies, holy shit, did it get kind of bad. But that's because those last 3 movies are terrible. And the Lego humor was the only reason why both of us could even get through it. As on that note, though, appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.